Welcome to the Chinese National Institute of Big Chatsubak.
I teach in American Indian Studies here at the University of Minnesota, and I'm really pleased to have good friends and collaborators also in the University of Minnesota system. Roxanne Gold is in education at Duluth, and Jim Rock is the director of the planetarium at Duluth. Jim is Dakota, and Roxanne is Ojibwe, Odawa, Grand Traverse, Michigan. One of the things, well, before I continue, I wanted to another round of applause for this. I'm in American Indian Studies, but I'm actually from Micronesia, from the same islands, and part of the work I do is with traditional navigation and canoes here. There's a really big Micronesian community. Actually, there's two Micronesian communities here in Minnesota. About 3.5 hours from here, in a town called Milan, there's anywhere from 400 to 500 folks from the same island where these guys are from, with lineage to Kashrai and Pompey. Then there's another community here. Their age range goes from like infants and toddlers to how old are you? 10. Some of the oldest is like 14 or 15 or something. So a group of Marshallese who have been adopted in a number of different families here. In both places, in both communities, we're seeing the same issues that this play presents. I would say in a very compelling ways. The issues that because I just saw it for the first time now. As a historian of Micronesia, a Micronesian who's also grown up away from home and who have lived in Hawaii and seen this. This play really goes to the heart of a lot of the struggles. But one of the things we wanted to do here, because Jim and Roxanne and I are part of a bigger group that is actually working with the Micronesian community and Dakota communities of the Upper and Lower Sioux, we're working with bringing the two communities together around water traditions. We're going to be building Micronesian canoes at Dakota dugouts, and the women we're going to be learning about water traditions from both places and sky traditions for navigation and for any number of things. But one of the things we wanted to talk about here was the question of the relationship between displaced native peoples like the Micronesians in places whose indigenous peoples are also economically, socially displaced by settler colonialism, military colonialism. That recurring theme of same boat, becomes especially pronounced when we center indigeneity. It was also one of the more compelling and painful and most powerful points about this play as well, is actually the level of violence between displaced indigenous people and the indigenous peoples of those places that they end up in. I was born and raised on Guam. I spent a lot of time in Hawaii. The story here is set in Hawaii. The animosity and the violence is especially pronounced between the displaced Micronesians and Kanaka Maoli Hawaiians or indigenous Chamorros. And so it gets a little more complicated, this idea of being in the same boat. And the levels of contradiction and ironies that come up. But one of the ways I want to get at that was I want to ask Jim and Roxanne, as Dakota and as Odawa, First Peoples of this place, is what if anything in this play you connected with from?
Okay, can you hear me okay? All right. Greetings, all my relatives. One of the things that really stood out to me was that level of animosity and that violence, because I think I come from a people who traveled lightly. We were traders, but we traded and we met as equals with our other indigenous relatives around Turtle Island, and that was before colonization. So we had, it was never a hand up to a hand down. It was, hand to hand. It was equals that were making relatives and trading with each other, coming together, making alliances, sometimes making families and so forth. But with the influx of colonization, all of that changed. And divide and conquer was used to have our people see our other indigenous relatives as, not as allies anymore, but as enemies. And we were given, in the beginning, oftentimes, larger amounts of whatever, or, we're told, you guys are good, but these guys over here aren't. And I think as what we originally had diminished, we began fighting with our indigenous relatives rather than working with them to make sure that not only could we live, but they could live as well. And that really struck out to me, is that we fall into this trap of fighting over crumbs rather than working to really expand that pie, to expand what is needed for all of us to live well.
Hello, my relatives. I greet you in Dakota language, language of my father. I said my name in Dakota, and when we greet each other as indigenous people, we say, hello, my relatives. How? Mitakuyapi. And Roxanne, people say, how mitakuyapi? It means hello, my relatives. Everything that Roxanne just said, that we meet as relatives, and not just the two-leggeds of us, but those that have the four legs, the wingeds, the swimming, the rooted, the crawling, flying. All relatives, the grasses, the rooted ones. We are all in the same canoe. And in that sense, my heart is feeling very deep love for you all here as my relatives. Chante etam, chante etam. From my heart, I offer you my hand as our traditional greeting, with love, with compassion. And that way, because we see your need, and we're here for you. And in that sense, you are still on the island. Your island. We call this Keawita, Turtle Island. Florida is one leg, Baja California is the other leg of the turtle. You're up on the Minnesota May. You are on the island. So, the thing you asked me before we came was like, what struck you most? I like to say it in my language. Watawanshi mahed unyakumpi. Watawanshi mahed unyakumpi. Wata. And you say, wa. Try that. Wa. Wa. Wata. Wata. What do you hear? What do you feel? Why would our Dakota word for canoe be wata and your word be? You are home, my relatives, or we are back with our relatives when we're in your homes. You see, one canoe, wata wanshi, canoe one, mahed, within, unyakumpi, we are. Canoe one, within we are. That's, we put our verbs at the end, so.
But one of the, Vince asked what kinds of things stood out. He asked me that before we came up here, and I said everything.
Everything, I said everything.
Because culturally there are so many, not only that history of colonization and the struggles that we have just to be human today, but that those beautiful cultural connections. I could relate. I was saying, oh, I should have worn my skirt. We have skirts that are really important to us as well, and the connection to your clans, the connection to your extended family. I grew up away from my homeland as well, and the reason for that there was lots of reasons for that, but most of it had to do with colonization. It had to do with people relocating to find jobs. It had to do with historical traumas and the traumas that it had on families and families splitting up and so forth. But I always go back. I always go back to my homeland, and every time I go back, I find new relatives. Last time I was home, I was like, oh, I have a relative, she lives out in Washington State, but she's from our village, her people are from our village. So it's very much that same thing. And it's the idea of coming home is a great celebration, even if it's for something as sad as a funeral, and people sharing food, people sharing whatever they have, being generous, being a good relative is what's most important.
One of the things I wanted to hit on was stuff that's familiar to me in the work I do in Micronesia around canoes is what I've been learning out here that I also learned when I was at the University of Michigan with Ojibwe and our folks over there working with canoes. And that's when you see the image of the water is ubiquitous everywhere. We see the common idea of the island, and so how water and land are really, in some ways, really shouldn't be compartmentalized. Where the land begins and the water ends, or where the water begins and the land ends, it's actually a very fine line. But the other thing that I was really happy to see here was also the skies, the stars. And so you cannot talk about an island without talking about an ocean or seas. And thinking about oceans and seas is not separating people but connecting people. The seas are the bridges, the highways. It was these things that allowed us to connect. And the differences, we're all in the same boat through our differences. It's because of a longer history of connection that account for the differences. It's not differences based on isolation. That's an entirely different way of thinking. But one of the things I've been learning here that just strikes me is how one cannot distinguish between land, water, sky, and peoplehood. So when you talk about people, you're also talking about the land. When you talk about the land, you're also talking about the water. And when you're talking about the water, you're also talking about the skies, the stars. And as Jim said, when you're talking about people in those terms, you're also talking about relations with other than humans, other creatures, other beings, that kind of thing. That kind of connection is one of the things that really I think I saw here that is confirmed and validated every time I learned something new around Dakota or Ojibwe water traditions. And the other two things that just stand out is language. If being displaced and disconnected is one of the legacies that bring indigenous peoples together as a result of the last 500 years of colonialism, It's also the refusal to give up on language and tradition and the connection to where your home is, right? Just because you end up somewhere else by virtue of that history doesn't, as much as the forces out there make it really easy for us to forget and to assimilate. The fact is, for 500 years, Indigenous peoples everywhere have refused to give up that deep connection through language, through stories. The other one is women.
Yeah.
A powerful
Yes.
place of.
She's bear claim. Have you figured that out?
Oh, I love the mama in this play. She was my favorite.
I know those eyes.
My mom is here too, so. But that understanding, that our cultures were traditionally, most of our cultures were very matriarchal. Because of that connection to that land, to that mother, to Makaina, to Mother Earth, and understanding that she was our first mother, and that women are the ones that they give life. And I'm finishing up a study on Indigenous women's relationship to water, and I met with women from the Hawaiian Islands, from the Southwest, from the Great Lakes, and from the Plains, and all of them have that in their culture, that women are core and central. A lot of times, when you're looking at it through a Western lens, when you're looking at it through or an academic lens, you don't see those subtleties that show the strength and the importance of the women in our cultures. And certainly those early observers that wrote down things about our cultures missed that greatly, because they were looking definitely through a Euro patriarchal lens, but that was very powerful. Mama's love is strong, and it was tender, but it was tough.
And with that one canoe that we're all in, I like to say one ball holds us all. That's the Mother Earth ball. That's our mom. We only have so many days paddling together here, and we say we come from the stars, and to the stars we return. We come from the earth, to the earth we return. But in all those days between sky and earth, we are to be a better relative each day than we were the day before. Expand those connections in the family. And it's been wonderful to meet Tina and Vince, and I look forward to meeting more of our relatives through these projects. The star world has, for example, sun and moon also, and those patterns of how they line up, whether it's for an eclipse or full moon and setting sun and rising. And so Vince and I have been feeling like, as we share these specific details, it's hard to get lost on land, you might think, but when the prairie grasses were 10 to 12 feet tall, when we had 60 million bison, and by the time my great-grandfather was born, the same year the light bulb separated us from the stars, 1879. There were only 300 buffalo left in the States and maybe 500 up in Canada, from 60 million to 800 buffalo. And it's like the ways that our relatives keep us alive. We're buffalo people, we lived in teepee, but we had the canoe. We find those same specific connections to your peoples, even in the language. So from the Polynesians, the Micronesians, Melanesians, it feels like we have all been here, for many tens of thousands of years. When the glaciers came, we went south, but we came back, and so do the birds every year, Sometimes, though, you might need a little warmer coat.
Yeah.
Buffalo or deer.
One of the things that's real cool when you go to Milan, the big Chuukese community there, all the women are wearing the skirts with sweats. I wanted to open it up for any comments, and if you what you connected with. You see the cast over there. I did want to make one other observation. In the play, you see how education is also sometimes at odds with tradition, right? One of the things that has been really pleasurable for me as a Micronesian in academia is meeting other natives like Jim and Roxanne, my spouse Tina, who's a teacher there. We also have a good friend, Hoku Aikau, teaches Pacific Studies. She's from Hawaii in Salt Lake City. At the University of Utah, still has Pacific Island Studies there with the youths over there. We're at a time where being native and being in academia, we don't make that distinction anymore. That we refuse that distinction. So let's open it up real quick. We have a little bit of, just a few more minutes.
We have a lot of white parents here of Micronesian children. What would you like us to know?
You know, I think that learning about your community and the language camps that you're doing for the kids is one of the most awesome things I've ever heard. I love the fact that there's a community of folks here, mostly white families, adopt Micronesian Marshallese kids, and understand that kind of family doesn't mean that those kids have to stop being Marshallese. I just love that. And I love the fact that you guys are working with folks in the Marshall Islands to build canoes.
Yeah.
We'll bring our communities together. I think your community has a lot to teach people here about families and citizenship for the 21st century. So I don't have anything to tell you. Any other comments?
I guess in that vein, one of the most delightful things in the show was to hear the youngsters laugh and feel joy.
Yeah.
And I really loved that happened.
Yes.
That happened in the show. I was just also appreciating seeing that it's up to young people to assume the work, to take on the labor of remembering, and that we should honor that. And I don't know, I just wanted to hear a little bit what you have to say about. It was nice to see that that's a struggle.
One of the things that I really loved was the discussion about connecting with all these beautiful natural places and the relationship that the children, the young people had to those natural places. And I think a lot of times we're told that if we live close to the earth, we're poor, that's poverty. If you have to dig a hole for a toilet, that's poverty. It's better if you flush a toilet with clean, potable drinking water than we have so little of, And we're told that that's poverty. But as Indigenous people, and we're part of a project that is really working to reclaim Dakota homelands and live close to the earth again. And we have people with PhDs living in earth lodges without electricity or running water all winter long. And it's not a hardship. It's a mindset, and I think that was so beautiful that's what they talked about missing the most.
We Dakotas also, we can get to this down the road, but we're 90% in exile from our own origin lands and where our ancestors here are buried. Since 1862, and 1863, the law is still on the books. So my Dakota father died here, I wish he could be here tonight, 9 years ago, and technically it was illegal, they put the bounty on and their family went to Canada. So we were exiles in Canada. Some, very few, came back to Minnesota, and in my case, married a European heritage mother. So we're all understanding what it is that colonization has done and how we can do no harm and reverse the harm done and learn to paddle the boat together.
I wanted to close. We have to prepare for the next show, but one more time, Ova, Leilani, and Cass, you guys